Hello, and welcome to the Future Now Talks. We all look at what the trends are to look out for, especially when it comes into cybersecurity. We have our CTO, Nikolai Solling, here to discuss just that, what to look out for, what the trends are, and how to stay ahead. Hi, Nikolai.
Thanks for having me, Anna.
When we're talking about the trends to look out for, and one of the things we've always talked about is AI and ML, and how it's changing the cybersecurity game. What do you have to say about that?
Well, first of all, I think that AI and machine learning, we've been utilizing it a lot in cybersecurity for a number of years, but I think this year it's specifically interesting because we start to see some real applications of AI that will impact not just cybersecurity, but our whole society. I think anyone would be living under a rock if they hadn't heard about ChatGPT and some of the capabilities that that platform is demonstrating right now. And while there's a lot of super interesting applications of that specific platform, like writing poems and all sorts of other fun things to do, unfortunately it also has a flip side because the capabilities from a language perspective in a platform like that also allows attackers to optimize how they create the content around some of their phishing campaigns. One thing that we've always had as cybersecurity professionals and even individuals that have good awareness about cybersecurity was that they could utilize the language and the content a phishing campaign was done around in order to identify if this was malicious or not. But with capabilities introduced by a platform like ChatGPT, it becomes much harder to identify a campaign just from the language side. There will be an imbalance for a period of time until we as an industry become better at responding to these specific things. So we already see that right now, and I'm certain that's going to be a little bit more pronounced in the coming quarters as we move forward.
Definitely. So AI, ML, other than just theory and what we've learned all these years, has also been put into practice, whether it's got to do with cyber attacks or whether it's been leveraged in the field of cybersecurity. The other thing that we've always talked about the past couple of years, and I think is only going to grow this year, are DDoS attacks.
Yeah, DDoS attacks is definitely something that we see a lot. Luckily, we have really good defenses and capabilities against it, and I'm happy to see that you know the vast majority of DDoS attacks we're able to completely automatically mitigate so that there's no impact on the customer environment. But what we saw was that there was an increase in the number of DDoS attacks and also in the size of the DDoS attacks. So what we used to consider a large DDoS attack today, just a couple of years ago, is now the normal kind of DDoS attack today. And we see DDoS attacks that are in the hundreds of gigs of data, sustained attacks that we're mitigating. Obviously, we have really good capabilities also through the partnership and ownership from the EN group of Help AG. So we have very good responses to it. But if a customer is not protecting themselves against DDoS attacks, you really need to understand that DDoS attacks is something that's here. It's something that's here to stay, and it's something that's only going to increase in the future.
The one piece of advice we give us customers is DDoS attacks are on the prowl and it's time to mitigate them and protect them. Okay, so the other kind of attacks that we've been seeing a rise in and a proliferation in, if I could say, are supply chain attacks.
Yeah, supply chain attacks is very interesting because it's kind of a hidden part of the attacks that we see. And there's multiple different ways of attacks that we can think about in supply chain, specifically in the relationship to software, since we are working in IT. But as an example, there's been some big vulnerabilities in some of the well-known commercial packages and software packages that are installed in customer environments in 2022. And these specific vulnerabilities allowed attackers to go in and impact organizations just because they were running that specific piece of software. I'm certain we're going to see the same focus from attackers in the future to also be able to identify some of these vulnerabilities. But supply chain attacks is actually a little bit more complex than that because it also stems from the fact that the way that we think about software, the way that we develop software have changed a lot over the last decade. Where in the, let's say, old days of software, all functionality of a software would typically be developed in-house, or you'd take certain commercial solutions to do certain things. Where today, modern software development actually consists of combining different kind of functionalities of libraries and capabilities that you can relatively easy get access to on the internet, and in these kind of repositories where you get these functionalities. So developers today are creating software by creating this patchwork of capabilities, which allows them to be really, really quick in how they develop software. But it also means that sometimes when one of these very popular libraries, if they have a vulnerability, it impacts a lot of softwares or a lot of applications at the same time. We saw that last year with a specific lock functionality that was utilized in a lot of applications, where the whole cybersecurity industry kind of stood still for a moment, because we were really worried that this would be that perfect storm of a vulnerability that would impact literally every single customer on the planet, right? It didn't turn out to be that bad, but it got us thinking a little bit as an industry around some of these challenges. And I'm very, very certain that we will start to see many of these issues impacting organizations in the future. And one of the things that I always advise customers to think about is, how do you create your software? What is the components that you utilize in your software? The software is a little bit like a cooking recipe, where you have these kind of different ingredients. You have eggs and flour and all sorts of other things, right? And you need to understand what is that recipe of your software. And if one of those components have a vulnerability, how is that going to impact your software? So understanding that how you create your software is extremely important, and also understanding how can you mitigate those specific vulnerabilities in your software. That creates capabilities from a security perspective in your software supply chain, something that we call DevSecOps, and I think many organizations will look at that in the future of how they create a much better framework around their DevSecOps policies and process.
Amazing. All right. So we did talk about 3 types of attacks that are going to rise in 2023. Let's talk more about the landscape, and specifically towards data regulations and compliance regulations that have been evolving not only within the UAE but regionally and globally, if you could say. What would you say would be the best advice you could give for it? How do we stay ahead of this and not become liable?
Well, regulations in general will impact organizations, how they work with many things, including IT, right? And the fact is that today many services, as we go through digital transformations within an organization, relies on harvesting a lot of data, whether that data is from your operations or whether it's about your consumers that's utilizing your application. And what organization needs to understand is that certain kind of data is regulated in a certain way. It has already been the case in Europe and in the US for a while, and now it's really starting to happen here in the Middle East. And in the UAE specifically, we have certain kind of regulatory frameworks that have already been announced. In KSA as well, we also have regulations happening depending on which kind of industry you're in. And what I can tell you, what will happen is that organizations need to start taking this seriously, specifically because they need to start understanding the data that they're utilizing, the data that they're collecting as well, and figuring out whether it's a liability to have that specific data. You know, many of the applications that we sign up to, even in our private life, right, they rely on knowing data about you, your email address and your information about yourself, maybe how old you are and maybe where you live or which kind of food you like, and all of these things, so that they can make good suggestions for you when you're inside of your food delivery app in order to choose these things. But the data that they host about you is also quite important, because it's also about where do you live and these kind of things. And these kind of things will have to be, they will be regulated in the future, and which regulation, what it means is that it will set some boundaries of how can you utilize that data. Again, if you're concerned about that as an organization, of how this will actually impact you, you know, we do assessments in that specific space and can help organizations understand how is this going to impact them in the future.
Help AG has been the pioneer in the service-centric evolution. That's something that we've been working on since day one of starting Help AG. And cybersecurity as a service is a trend that we're going to see grow even more and even further, with the statistic from Help AG saying about 90% of organizations will adopt a service-centric evolution into cybersecurity by 2025. So what do you see for this year? Why is it being shifted to cybersecurity service, and what does Help AG do?
So first of all, absolutely correct. We see a great uptake in our services, whether that is our managed security services, whether it's our support services, or all of the other capability we deliver as services within Help AG. Our, we were just talking about data regulations and the consultancy services we deliver in that specific space. And one of the things that is the main driver behind that is that cybersecurity is becoming incredibly complex for organizations to deal with. So staying secure and having the right response to cyber attacks is incredibly complex for organizations today. And if you're a manufacturing organization, or if you're a government organization which has a certain purpose of manufacturing something, or you're a specific government body that is doing a specific thing, maybe you don't want to worry about the security element of it, because that will never be your core functionality. You should be focusing on manufacturing that specific product that you have, not necessarily securing your IT and your digital transformation. And that kind of understanding is starting to happen with clients today, that it's not economical for them to build up these kind of capabilities in-house. And what they're really looking for is a partner that can help them to deliver those services. I keep talking about it as a partnership because that is really what it is. We cannot make a customer secure or client secure, but what we can do is we can partner with them to make sure that their process becomes better. So yeah, no doubt that there's a very big difference in a company that is hopefully waking up every single morning only with one mission, and that is to produce or manufacture that specific product. The product that Help AG is manufacturing is cybersecurity. So every morning, every single one of our 450 employees, when they turn on their laptop, it's about making sure that we keep our customers safe. And the shifts that are going to bed at 7 o'clock in the morning when the rest of us start, right? All night long, as they were working, they were focusing just on that. So our product is cybersecurity, and there's a key difference in those two things. So we only focus on that. And if you haven't already started looking at cybersecurity services, right, I really urge you to have a conversation with us on
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us here, Nikolai. And as Nikolai said it, if you have any concerns on your cybersecurity, contact our experts at any time. Thank you very much.